Normally, I'm not someone who gets excited for the lead up to Halloween as much as a lot of other people. I don't think I've worn a costume with actual effort put into it since I was in high school. But the good news is that now that I've been playing Animal Crossing New Horizons long enough, I get to make costumes and put out decorations. Yay! Oh wait, this is supposed to be a video about the bad guys. 200 years from now, when we're all dead and YouTube film critics are in history books, I want to be remembered as the black one who talked about every piece of bad guys media ever released.
Protect my legacy!
Real talk though, I kind of just needed a quick breather in between my longer videos set to come out for the rest of the year. Brief recap to any new viewers who happen to stumble upon this review that don't normally watch my stuff. I love The Bad Guys. The movie, classic. Machismo Ruby, great short. The holiday special, I'm the physical manifestation of that yes, all of you are wrong meme on Twitter. The shark. You better believe I'm gonna be there opening weekend for that sequel when it comes out next year. Then I remembered, oh yeah, they've got a Halloween special coming out before then. It looked to be around the same quality as the holiday special based on the trailer, and I kind of assumed that I'd feel the same way towards it because of that. Nothing that was up to the standards of the original, but a nice prequel that would be a good excuse to see Dr. Shark and the Furry Mayhem again in a lighthearted seasonal event. And I would be completely and contently alone with those feelings all by myself. I haven't disliked anything from this franchise yet, so I'm sure I'll enjoy this, right? No, it was the exact opposite, actually. I was pretty stunned by how much this short didn't work for me. Again, I'm someone who unironically liked A Very Bad Holiday, so I didn't expect to be this annoyed at something to come out that featured these characters. I already more or less accepted the downgraded animation quality, though I've got to acknowledge that it does still make for a rough watch in both cases. Why is it that this franchise's content seems to have gotten the worst possible treatment by Netflix? I bet a good number of you watching can't even tell which footage is coming from which special. That's how indistinguishable they look. And to clarify, I blame the studio executives for this entirely, not the animators themselves. They don't control how much they have to work with. But yeah, that's not really what got on my nerves about this. Just like the holiday special, this takes place before the events of the movie, meaning that the bad guys aren't redeemed yet and are still criminals. It abruptly opens with Wolf telling a scary myth about a new character named Reginald E. Scary. Basically, he was also a thief, but because he was so paranoid about someone giving him a taste of his own medicine and stealing from him, he locked himself in a mansion till his death to preserve this crescent amulet he stole, and anybody who stole it from him would have a curse put on them. So the bad guys are gonna go steal it, with this spooky story being the basis for the main plot. I think this is a fine outline for a story with the bad guys. It could be kind of interesting to see them navigate their way through being gay and doing crime amidst things like a haunted house, ancient curse, or supernatural monsters. And also it'd be disingenuous to try and complain about it not being scary. Something for kids being themed around Halloween usually doesn't mean that it's made with the goal of making them terrified, let alone someone my age. But even though it doesn't have to be scary, I do at least expect it to be creative, which leads into my first big issue with this short, the heist itself. It isn't a particularly well constructed one, with the time we spend in the haunted house being very limited on the extent to which it actually wants to be haunted. All we really have is hearing mysterious voices and sentient plate armor that chases them. Maybe I should put the plate armor outside my house inside the garage on Halloween just in case. So those are the only obstacles standing between them and getting the crescent amulet. Seems like a very easy heist to pull off to me, and yet the short wants you to believe otherwise because of how freaked out the characters are all the time. Even if this isn't meant to be the main tension of the story, what reason do I have to believe that nobody else has attempted to steal such an iconic object before if these are the only obstacles they have? Speaking of the bad guys themselves, okay, so what drives the conflict amongst them here is the others being distrusting of Wolf with this whole heist thing in the first place. This is because of how many times he's pranked them on Halloween in the past. It's a real boy who cried wolf sort of situation that comes into play in the second half once they finally do get the crescent amulet. I can see these being interactions that the characters have with each other, and on some level I get that they're just harmless jokes, but you have to take into consideration how Wolf has been characterized up to this point. He's never been one to deliberately be the root cause of tension between his teammates. He takes what they think about him seriously. That's why he initially doesn't tell them he wants to be good in the movie. That's why him overestimating himself, causing the mission to save their Christmas heist failing, hits him so hard. It feels off from a character standpoint, and that's without taking the ending into account, but we'll get back to that later. This behavior is the sort of thing I can imagine Snake doing, since he has a comparatively different love language towards the other characters that comes at their expense in one way or another. And it's not unlikable attached to Wolf, but it is out of place. In general, this setup means that there's also not many opportunities for the team to utilize their skills, which I wouldn't mind if they still had good jokes or witty dialogue, but neither of those are there either. The dynamic between them as a group feels noticeably more chaotic here, but not in a way that's charming, funny, or dramatic, just something that makes sense given the circumstances. Mr. Piranha's chronic farting is back again, which they didn't even bother to give us a reminder that this is what happens when he gets nervous. It just happens. Then again, I guess the writers rightfully assume that only people who watch the movie would even bother checking this out. Does this mean I'm a super fan, chat? Yeah, this is still the worst running gag in the franchise by far, even though it's book accurate. At least Sharky is untarnished in terms of my enjoyment of him. There's one bit towards the end involving him and a lucky rabbit's foot that made me smile. I wish they could have found a way to let him use his disguise skills, but other than that, he's just a silly little goober. They can never do anything to make me hate him. I think everything almost picked up by the time they escape the haunted house. We're shown that Wolf has been cursed by Ari's Scary and nobody believes him because he saw the whole heist as an excuse to prank them again once all was said and done. It ends up going so wrong that the bad guys get their soul stolen. I knew it wasn't permanent, but I thought it was a nice simple way of him being humbled and a reminder that he does still care about his team at the end of the day. Yeah, so it turns out that all the events that unfolded were part of an elaborate hoax that everyone except Wolf was in on, and it was their collective way of getting back at him for all the Halloween pranks he caused.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
I really hate to keep bringing up the movie in this discussion, but it's a good example to point to when talking about what doesn't work here. It's a heist that also has a lot of unexpected reveals like this, but the difference with the movie is that there was actual build-off, foreshadowing, and payoff to those developments that made their reveals satisfying. Snake's established in the opening scene to consider guinea pigs to be food. It's a motif that occurs frequently throughout the movie, so being one step ahead of Marmalade, with the way he goes about it also being planted with the lamp being shaped identically like the meteorites.
A giant butt!
Never feels forced or like it came out of nowhere. The push pop? As much of a reach as it is to say it out loud, it does feel like effective synecdoche for his growth as a character, and Wolf always seeing the potential of his teammates even when they don't see it themselves. But in Haunted Heist, micro speakers, virtual reality simulators, the only way I can really see this having any buildup is with the general idea that Miss Tarantula is a tech whiz. And even then, Snake is the one that figures out how to make the plate armor move on its own for very vague reasons. Oh, and also it turns out that Wolf was also actually in on their host, and he also figured out how to use the virtual reality simulators to make it look like he disintegrated. This isn't subversive, this is just contrived, and it wastes a potentially good villain for the sake of a cheap gotcha moment. I hate to use the word pointless, but when you set up the idea that Wolf needs a taste of his own medicine only to sloppily backtrack from that, there's not really any other way of putting it. So in case you couldn't tell, I'm unfortunately not big on this one. It's the first piece of bad guys media I can confidently say you can skip whether you're a fan of the movie or not. I was hyping this like all hell in a Discord server I was in. You know how embarrassed I must have felt when it turned out I didn't like it? But I really hope my opinions on this short dispel the idea that I'm always willing to blindly praise anything that stems from this franchise, just because it has my third favorite character in all of fiction. The Bad Guys Holiday Special has flaws, but for the most part, the cheapness of it started and ended with the animation. It was still creative with the story, it had heart, it took pre-established characterization into account when writing the characters. These were just things that reasonably got glossed over by a lot of people because of how difficult it was to move past the way it looked compared to the original. By contrast, everything about this new Halloween special feels cheap. The jokes, the writing, the Halloween theming, all of it. And more than anything, it makes me increasingly eager for us to finally get that theatrical sequel, where they hopefully finally get to prove their worth as a franchise as we move forward and see what the future is like for them now that they're redeemed. I'm sure all the Diane simps are starving to see her again right now. As much as I didn't like this short though, I don't feel compelled to have it linger in my mind. Most of the DreamWorks franchises have at least one bad thing attached to them, and it still doesn't change my fondness for the characters. I don't know if I've mentioned it enough times on this channel, but y'all have to understand that I really... Anyways, I'm sorry to start off the month so negative, but don't worry. I've got a lot of great things in store for the coming months, so stay tuned.